what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Lineage Break, a Grand Archive TCG podcast. I am your host, Cam, and both making their triumphant return is Mark and Trent.
Hey, how's it going?
What'd it do?
Today, we are happy to tell you that our show is brought to you by Perfect Fit TCG. As always, if you buy anything on their site, you can use our code LB5 at checkout. You get 5% off and a little kickback to us here at Lineage Break. Other things to go over, I'm very excited to announce that regionals are coming up, and as we talked about, I think last week or last time we did a podcast, there's none around us, but on July 29th, I will be doing live coverage of Red Riot Games regional in Canada. That's July 29th. I'll be doing that with the beautiful and talented Red Zone Rogue, so that's very exciting stuff. Other than that, also, since we've been gone, I think it's been 2 weeks. Did we skip the podcast last week?
Yeah,
it's been a while.
Coverage last time.
Yeah, somebody. I'm not going to name any names, guys, but somebody just refused to edit the podcast for 5 days. It was
I hate
me.
that guy.
It was me. So since that's happened, we have also had store championships. Are at least applications are up. I think they said that those are going to start being accepted on the 16th, so a couple of weeks. But I've been doing some reaching out to some stores in the area because, you know, we got to support New England because we don't have a regional, so we have to make sure that that we have as many store championships as possible. So I've been trying to get some of the local shops on board, and I know that these lovely gentlemen have been doing that as well.
I've been trying, man, but it's a little tough with no product, you know?
Yeah, that is true. You just got to, you know, it's people, I guess.
Yeah, I'm doing
Print
a demo
and play.
Sunday. Yeah, I'm doing a demo Sunday, so I have to like bring everything I have to,
Right.
you know, just like show them like, hey, these are the decks, these are the card games, but then, you know.
Yeah, and Mark's right. Like you get to the end of the demo where, of course, you ran a great demo, you know, and they're like, oh, how do I get involved? And you're like, well, you can't buy product anywhere, actually. So, you know, you can print them on the website. Thank God for print and play, right? Like that's the only thing that we got going for us is, you know, new players can at least play for free.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if we're in the minority, but like here at the store, we're very proxy friendly. I don't know if other people do that or.
I imagine you have to be at this point. I mean, boxes have been going up for what, like a month?
Yeah, they're up to like 120 or something.
I didn't even
right
know
now,
that. That's pretty bad.
To be fair, I mean, like MSRP is I think 110, so it's
it's like 108.
Yeah, so it's not that much higher, but it's you know, we started like we were selling at 88 a box or 90 box. Or
Yeah, I was buying boxes at 80.
Yeah.
So
I think that's illegal, but you know. Don't out those people.
I mean, like in general, 80.
Yeah, sure, around the 80, not from us.
Yeah.
Not from us.
Right.
I want that to be clear.
No, I was paying 108 from you and Great Stories, surely.
No. Well, you know. Now you're throwing us under the bus the wrong way. It's just, you know, there's no saving it. But yeah. Store championship, super exciting. Hopefully, I don't know. Did you guys look at the application at all? Because like, obviously you guys don't need to like submit one, so there's no reason that you should have. But something that I found a little bit odd. I get it to a certain extent, but you guys let me know how you feel. One of the like part of the application is like you have to agree to their terms or whatever, which is totally fine. But you need 16 people to attend your store championship to run it. Which is like kind of a lot of people.
That is a lot of people.
And I didn't know if, you know, how you guys felt about that. It seems like we'll do that here, but like not by a whole lot. I think we'll probably, you know, if we get everybody that plays here, we'll have like 16, 18 people.
Well, our locals is like 8 to 10.
Yeah,
right?
we're usually like 10-ish, but that's like a rotating door. So like I think that we definitely have more than 16 people that play here.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll come to store champs. But I've been talking to some of the stores in the area. Like I just talked to somebody up in New Hampshire, and he's like, I've seen him he's been like posting a lot, and he's like super passionate about the game. He's like, yeah, you know, I have like 4 people at my locals right now.
Oh no.
And I was like, well, you know, sign up. And like I've been telling everybody that we'll try to herd the community, you know, as I'm trying to get all the dates to line up so that they don't overlap, so we can just like, you know, travel all these things within an hour. But that, you know, without that, it seems so hard to be like super into the game and like trying to push it and signing up for store champs. But like,
yeah,
16 is kind of a lot.
I was gonna say, I think it's like, you're gonna have to get a lot of people who do a lot of traveling.
Right.
It's like, if I go to a couple of them, then I'm one more person at theirs.
Right.
So hopefully we can get a lot of draw from, the bigger area.
Right.
But it's hard. It's hard with not a lot of product out there in order to get people into the
Right.
game and then get them, to a 16-person minimum.
Yeah, I think we're also sitting in the weird spot where like a lot of these store championships, like ours is scheduled for like early August. It's going to be like right before we get the DOA reprint and right before we get the FTC.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be like right at the point where like you do have the product again and you can get new people in, but like you have to be like, you should come play the game. Also it's today
At the store championship.
Yeah, the store championship is tomorrow.
Will Fracture the Crown be legal for our
No.
store championship? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I think they're all. I don't think they set an end date. They all have to be post July 29th, so
Yeah.
they don't start until after the 29th. But at least everybody that I've talked to is scheduling them pre FTC because it's it's DOA season. We're not supposed to be able to play FTC.
Right.
But I'm not sure. Like I don't know if there's an end date. So like if you schedule yours September 1st or something, I don't know if you're allowed to use FTC.
It's
It's
interesting.
an interesting question, but it won't affect us. Because ours is scheduled for the 6th, I think, is what I put it down. But
I'm also kind of curious what happens. So if you sign up for it and you're like, well, say you're expecting to get 16, but nothing happens, like you just can't run the event.
I assume you just like have to send the promo stuff back.
You just get hosed and have to send the promo. That's pretty.
I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna handle it, and that might just be a like a sort of a I don't
Suggestion,
know
not
like
a
a
rule.
warning sign, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like we want everyone to plan to get 16, and like I like the people at Weebs of the Shore are very kind and usually very community driven. So I find it hard to believe that you have the 14-man event. And they're like, I don't know, see you later. You send it back to us. But I think it's more so it's better to set that in place so that people plan for that. And
Right.
if you fall a little shy, that's okay. Yeah, but I don't know. It might just be a template that they're going to use going forward. Because it's a double-edged sword, right? I played Weiss for a long time.
I'm sorry.
Beautiful game, that Weiss Schwartz. But I played that game competitively, which is also a mistake. But so for their nationals, it was very similar to this, where there was like local qualifiers.
Mm-hmm.
And those were strange, and I think that might be what Weebs is trying to avoid, is that those were based on your like player base beforehand. So like if you were a store that ran 20-man locals every week, you would get X number of slots, where if you were a store that ran 4-person locals every week, you would get less,
slot,
right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, you would get into these situations where like you go to an event that's like a 2-slot event, and 6 people show up, and so it makes the like prestige of nationals feel
Lower. Yeah.
yeah, like nothing. Like there's plenty of games, where you can go around and tell people, yeah, I qualified for nationals, and they'll be like, oh, congratulations. And in Weiss, it's like, yeah, of course you did. You play the game. Like, of course you qualified for nationals. You showed up, So I think they're trying to avoid that, where at least, like 16-person tournaments, only the winner gets an invite. Is like, that's an accomplishment to win a 16-man tournament, So I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. I'm curious how they're going to handle it, but
I was kind of hoping for 8. I mean, the scene's not huge in most places other than the big ones like Texas, Canada, Cali.
yeah, and I'm not sure how wide they want to spread it, right?
I mean, they'd end up with like very few people at
Right.
the actual event then, right? Would they
Right.
even fill out the thing? Well, I guess there's going to be more qualifiers, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
for now, it'll probably be fine overall, but
Yeah.
for now it feels weird.
We were talking about this before we aired, in that Grand Archive's a little bit weird in that there's several seasons that qualify you for the same tournament. So we have, not only DOA, but we also have the FTC season of both regionals and store championships that qualifies for the same nationals event. So maybe, we're just looking at it the wrong way, and they're looking to be a little bit more selective, and maybe there will be less like qualifier events than we're used to with other games, because you get, multiple seasons. I'm really not sure. All very exciting, to say the least, but
Yeah, I mean, I think as like the more people that we get into it now, like they have more opportunities
Right.
to show up and go. So I'm actually kind of like happy that they're doing multiple seasons for one single tournament. I think that's nice.
Yeah, I like that. I don't want to be, egomaniac or whatever, but I like that I'm not like super worried about getting a qualification because there's so many chances. I'm like, surely one of these events I will be able to get a qualification. Because I really want to go to nationals. I know you guys do as
same.
well. So March-ish, I think they said March 2024.
Okay.
Do we know where it is? Probably not yet.
Well, I mean it's national,
probably,
so it's in the U.S. somewhere.
Okay, sick.
Yeah, we don't know where Worlds is, and that I'm like, hopefully we're in the U.S. for that.
Yeah.
Listen, Australia, I love you, I do, but come on. But nationals is like, no matter where it is, obviously we're going because it's in the U.S.
Right.
Unless they're like, we put it in Hawaii, and then I'm like, why would you do that?
Alaska.
Well, Alaska. Yeah.
Alaska would be sick.
That would be cool.
It would be something. It would be an experience.
Yeah.
And we would be there, unfortunately. But, shout out to Alaska. I'm sure you guys are great.
They have a growing scene there, dude.
It's huge. It's massive. Yeah, they're like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? We're on a 64-man event for our
they're crushing
store
it.
camps.
You guys going to Anime Alaska?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't wait. Yeah. Wonder what the promo's going to be for that one. So, hey, sudden snow,
Sudden snow.
We're funny. In other news, a couple of big things happened since we've been gone, and that is part of the reason why we didn't shoot an episode last week, is that we were like right before the big bans and restricted announcement. So we got two things, which was kind of a shock. At least it was to me. I don't know if it was to you guys. The rules change that we got on the 19th.
Yeah, the rules change really surprised me. I thought it was just going to be a BNR announcement.
Right.
So seeing that come along with it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice.
I think the actual change they made doesn't surprise me, but the fact that they made one was just a little a curveball.
Right. Yeah, I think that we were all on the some things could be changed, but the game is so new that they probably just don't touch it until set 2. To be fair, I think, at least personally, I'm glad that they did. But before we give our thoughts on the thing, just for people who are unaware, so there was a pretty big rules change to the game. And the long short of that, it says whenever you level up your champion, you no longer wake up. So this was something that was super important for Infusion Lorraine decks who would play, they would level to 2, they would kill something with their level 2 Lorraine, they would draw a card. They would then play a dungeon guide, level up out of sequence, go up to level 3, wake up their Lorraine, and then you get another instance of that +2 attack on kill draw. And it also sort of removes the ability for Infusion Lorraine to kill you straight from level 2, where they would level up, untap, play a bunch of infusions because they're now free, swing at you for 12, draw a bunch of cards.
It also made Dungeon Guide not just free.
Yeah, worse, which is good.
Just getting 2 Drawn Blade triggers really just it just made leveling up to level 3 basically free.
Right. And you get a body out of it, right?
Yeah. Just,
it's card neutral and you get a body is, wild. So yeah, how do you guys feel about this change before we talk about the BNR?
I'm actually really happy with it. Specifically just taking a little bit of power out of Dungeon Guide for Lorraine. You're still going to have all that power for Rye. You need it to really expedite your plays. But just taking away that absurd infusion turn and maybe hopefully going back to Ensoul, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it kind of moves the turns. You take away a half a turn from Lorraine's go off turn. So I think it's good. I think it's a good change, and I also think that the rules are where I think that those changes need to be made to the game a little bit. And I think it's a positive one. Right. So it's nice that the devs are also paying a lot of attention. to that.
For sure.
So.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to play devil's advocate and be like, I really think it's awful for the game. But no, I think it's a net positive. So many people were worried because, Dungeon Guide and Beseech the Winds are such absurdly powerful cards that they see so much play. And so a lot of people, pre-BNR were like, well, they're going to ban Dungeon Guide or Beseech the Winds because they just sort of warp the game around them, which they do to an amount. But like Mark said, you're right in that if you remove Dungeon Guide, it doesn't help the meta problem, because Dungeon Guide is so much of a crutch for the decks to play against Lorraine as it is for Lorraine herself to use it. Where this change, I think, is really elegant in that it makes Dungeon Guide worse almost exclusively for Lorraine and for nobody else. So, you get to keep the power level for decks like Rye and Xander. And Lorraine obviously will still play it, but you lose that sort of explosive kill potential. There's so many games, as Rye or as Xander, where your Lorraine opponent is at level 1. It's your turn. Your Lorraine opponent is at level 1, and you have to look at your hand and look at their hand and be like, do they kill me next turn?
Yeah.
Because they just they level to 2 and then they Dungeon Guide and they kill you.
Yeah.
And so at least now you feel like a little bit safer, where she can still do that, and she probably still will, and resolve a bunch of ascensions and draw a bunch of cards, but it's very hard for her to threaten the kill jumping from level 2 to 3, because like Mark said, if we're going back to an Ensoul meta, even if you draw your 9 cards, 8 cards off of Ascension, those are all on that turn card neutral, so you're not going to be able to build enough advantage to play Ensoul, so it at least puts you one more turn behind. And I think that one turn is super crucial for these explosive endgame decks like Xander and Rye.
I think it really puts Lorraine, the way Lorraine was before, it almost felt like you were playing, it's not an aggro deck, but you felt as much pressure as these Rending Flame decks where you're like, I'm just going to die if I don't do something now.
Right.
And it feels like with the change, you're kind of on the same turn as Rye now.
Right.
So it's a little more back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super interested in the implications for Rye. I know that you guys were talking about that a little bit today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the Rye versus Lorraine matchup, you end up you're always just a half a turn behind,
right.
It feels like. So I feel like this, kind of narrows the gap a little bit. So I'm very excited for it. I think playing with those changes, it's going to be interesting at least.
Yeah. I think it's super cool that we're in the midst of Fractured Crown spoilers, and we've talked a bunch about those, and we got some more that have come out this week, but we're going to save that until next week's episode to talk about those. But everyone's so excited looking forward that it's hard to look at DOA that we've been playing for quite a while and have that excitement to build and test stuff for store championships and regionals. And so it's I think it's really cool that they've sort of infused some new life, pun intended, for for the DOA format, right before store championships.
Yeah, I think I mean, I love brewing stuff, so I've been playing a lot of wonky decks.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Merlin Mill was a pretty interesting one.
Can we get that on camera, Trenton? Is that is that
the Merlin Mill?
The Merlin Mill deck, yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'll have to put it back together. Actually, I took some of it apart for another deck that Mark was going to play tonight, so we'll see.
We'll record 60 matches, and I promise one of them it'll look sick, and then we'll upload
that
one and be look how broken it is.
That one,
yeah. This is the first game that we played, and it's absolutely broken.
It's got a good matchup on slow. If the game goes to turn 40,
yeah, we're talking about Lorraine moving her kill turn from turn 5 to 6, and he's like, well, when she gets to that turn 40, she's dead. I got her locked down.
So before we move on from the change, I actually have something that I think is maybe it's a little crackpot theory.
Ooh,
but I think there's actually a bigger reason that they might have done this. I think there might be something where perhaps one of the new champions might have an on-rest ability.
Right.
And they don't want you to be able to use it.
Sure.
Dungeon Guide, go to level 3, wake up and do it again.
Right.
It might be something quirky like that. I think it's just better for the game to not have interactions that will limit their level to champion design.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. It feels like the birthing bod problem to me, right?
Yeah.
For those who don't play Magic, I do that a lot, so I always have to explain my references to Magic cards. Birthing pod is a creature combo tool, and so the existence of the card made it really hard for them to print any creatures with good on-enter effects. And this feels very similarly, where with this change, you're right, they can never design a champion that has a rest effect, because you just get too much value out of it being able to do it twice a turn. Even you look at Merlin, right? Imagine if that was an inherited effect and you could do that on level 3, it would be insane.
Oh my!
It'd be you have 2 float. You'd be all right, I'll eat one with Merlin. I'll Dungeon Guide. I'll level up. I'll eat your other one with Merlin. Go ahead.
I think Silidar talked about that a little bit on the Discord.
He?
Yeah, he was you could do this, so we wanted to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, so I think changes are good. I'm still a little bit worried about Dungeon Guide and Beseech the Winds, just as, cards in the game. I mean, it seems like they are sort of trending towards keeping the game a little bit faster. They've made some allusions to that with the new Fractured Crown stuff, and like that little blurb that they had about cards with influence, where they're like, we don't want players to have too many cards in their hand because that leads to decision paralysis, which leads to slower games.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dungeon Guide and Beseech the Winds sort of add to that speed of the game because they allow you to sort of jump steps, but it's always a really scary, It's like right now, we don't have any powerful enough on-enter effects that are like game-breaking to jump there. Like the best we have is, Lorraine pseudo-draw card, which is still pretty good.
Yeah.
But you get to the point where if we ever hit something that it just has a much higher power spike at level 3, these cards become like a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, and I think like we were talking about this a little bit before on the way here. Was the game is tilted a little bit more towards aggro at the moment, which I think makes for a better experience for players,
sure.
Especially for new players getting
Sure.
into the game.
Yeah.
Because I was telling Mark. I remember getting into Magic and playing against Blue-White Control, and they would drop Morphling, and then they'd force away my spells, and I'm like, oh, I just can't play the game because my big green creature doesn't do anything.
Well, Morphling, huh?
Yeah,
Enjoy your stay.
It was pretty brutal.
What year was that, Trent?
1960.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, that one.
But no, it's leaning a little bit more towards aggro and less towards control. I think is really nice. But I also think that the cards coming in through FTC, they're going to change that. They're going to move it back a little bit, move the needle, which I think it's going to have a good balancing effect on the game too. So I think it'll be interesting just to see what new stuff people come up with. But I'm glad that that they're making changes to the rules,
right?
Rather than just reactionarily printing new cards or designing new
or
cards,
banning things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I agree. So we can move on to the BNR proper. And as was sort of expected by most of us here in the community, there were no actual bans. The only cards that are on the ban list are the 2 cards that were designed exclusively for sealed play. We mentioned those a few weeks ago. We don't really need to worry about that. And then there's a 3rd card that is going to be the Anime Expo promo, I believe.
Yep.
And so it is on the ban list because it is a Fractured Crown card, and so it is banned until the release of Fractured Crown because people will have it in hands in, a week or 2. So we won't dwell on those, but the important part is they sort of have explained how they're going to be handling bans in the future, which I think is super elegant. The thing that I've liked. I made a post about this on Twitter. I gotta share some beef with you boys. I made a post about this on Twitter about how excited I was about the BNR and how I really like how Weebs handles things, and then Silidar responded and called me a simp. It was just it's just really uncalled for. It's just all right, whatever, man. Just trying to sport the homies. Yeah. All right. So anyways, these absolute buffoons over at Weebs of the Shore.
There's something a little brown on your nose.
Yeah. So they've split the cards that they're worried about on their watch list into 3 categories. And these categories are sort of like hurricanes. The higher we get, the more worried they are about it. So they have category 1, 2, and 3. 3 is we're gonna ban it. You better watch out. Sell all your copies now. 2 is we're sort of worried about it, and then 1 is super powerful cards that could become a problem but aren't really, in the danger of being banned. So we can start at the top, I guess, which would be category 3, and I don't think there's anything right now in the very scary place.
Nothing yet.
It's all a matter of perspective, right? And obviously they're the ones designing the game. I think maybe some of these cards, in my opinion, are more of a category 3 than they are a category 2, but it's moving goalposts, right? It doesn't matter that much.
I think FTC is going to shake up exactly what's on this list by law.
I agree. All right, so moving on to category 2, where we actually have some cards. The first card that they're worried about is Sword of Avarice, I think for very obvious reasons. Everybody has played against
I think it's fair.
Ascension decks, and
Yeah, as a Lorraine player, I'm sure you do.
I honestly, just as someone who plays 4 Ascension and 4 Cruxite in every deck, I think this card honestly should have more copies.
sure. Yeah, the inclusion of this card I feel a little bit strange about. I don't think that there's really anything wrong with Sword of Avarice. I think there is something wrong with Spirit Blade Ascension, and I don't know why they decided this is the one that we're going to watch out for. I mean, I get it. Like, right now, you don't... Like, if you get Prismatic Edge, there's very few opponents where it's going to have the same 2-for-1 effect that Sword of Avarice does, right? Like, if you're playing Wind and your opponent's playing Water, or you have access to both of those elements, vice versa, it becomes a 2-for-1, right? But that's pretty rare. But obviously, yeah, Sword of Avarice is the best card to get with your Ascension, but it's the same problem with the rules change that they made, where the existence of Spirit Blade Ascension makes it hard for them to print any swords that have powerful ETB effects at all. It's not even like Crux swords, or like in Soul is like swords that cost 1 or less. It's just swords.
Yeah, just anything.
Yeah.
Well, he was actually talking, Silidar was actually talking on the Discord about, in their initial testing, cards like any strong like attack value swords being too powerful anyways, just for like the raw tempo and card advantage of just beating down whatever. They were kind of oppressive, so they weren't planning on releasing any big swords or powerful regalia anyways, but I still think Ascension is just not good for the game. I mean, it's great. No, I mean,
it's awesome. We love it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the way that Ascension works, right? It's the put the thing back and then just go get it again. That's the part that's really tough about it.
Yeah, I always say this to new players, and now that I've been insulted by the development team, I get to be a little bit harsher. I've said this a lot when I teach new players the game, and I have to come to the discussion about Lorraine because it always comes up, and I'm like, yeah, they do a really neat thing in Grand Archive where all of the rules text is very clear. I'm never confused what a card does. The only times I'm confused in Grand Archive is why they designed a card this way. where like Spirit Blade Ascension is very deliberate that you put that sword into your memory as part of cost. Yeah. And I'm like, that is very clear to me. I just don't know why. I don't know why this was the decision they made.
When I first started playing, I actually thought you had to go from Drawn Blade to Avarice, and like you had to go back and forth because I was like, there's no way they just put Pot of Greed into the game.
Right.
But no, they just did.
It's deliberate. Yeah, they sure did.
8 copies of Pot of Greed.
Right.
It's pretty good.
So yeah, I don't know. It's pretty strong, and I think, like Mark said, it's probably low on the list because Fractured Crown does have a lot of like anti-Lorraine tools, and it has a lot of anti-card draw tools. So I think, at least for now, they're probably waiting to see how that shakes out, and I think there is a real possibility that, despite all of these things against her, this Ascension Lorraine deck comes out on top anyway. We'll see. But I'm glad they're looking at something, at least.
I don't think you can make a fair deck that has Cruxite and Ascension in it. Like, the shell's going to change, but I don't think no matter what changes until Ascension's banned or Sword, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think the only thing that we have to hopefully... I don't even know if it ends up being such a like power level problem as it's like a cards being, or a deck's being homogenous problem, where like every Crux deck should be playing these 8 cards. I think the only way that we sort of hopefully break out of that mold in FTC is if your Lorraine decks, aka Merlin decks, are swinging more in the mage direction, and then there's a reason to not have access to Spirit Blade Ascension and Cruxite because you're so much less sword dense. But even then, I think it's really hard.
I think
to justify.
You just play them.
Yeah, not playing Pot of
Greed. Because you can just play Drawn Blade in anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
And if
it
you're
is
playing
class
mage,
bonus draw card, I think. But
ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Still, I think.
But when you're level 3, you have the class bonus again, right? So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean your level 2 is like, if you're going Merlin, then it's just going to be remove a floating memory thing anyway, level up, and then yeah. So I think you can still hit 3 and then play Drawn Blade. I think that's reasonable.
Right, and that's the part that I'm worried about is that like I think the identity of Lorraine and like Crux as an element I think is super neat, and it feels a little bit bad that sort of homogenized into, only running these 8 broken draw 2 cards instead of, like, I really like the idea of toolbox cards.
Yeah.
But there's no reason for you to get anything other than Sword of Avarice or Prismatic Edge with your Ascension. There's no reason to have a toolbox, you know, where you're like, oh, now you can get Erendite, which is like super cool. But you won't, because you can draw 2 cards instead.
Oh, I will.
You know?
Cards,
Maybe you get it at the end after you've drawn 8 cards.
It's the last one you get.
Yeah, the last one you get an Erendite, but I don't know.
I think even if they got rid of Sword of Avarice, I still think Prismatic Edge looping would be a problem.
I agree.
There's going to be some point where water decks are like the meta prevalent color,
which means that Prismatic Edge is much better.
You just play Wind Lorraine again.
Right.
Yeah, because Prismatic Edge doing the 2-for-1 thing when you're on wind and they're on water is like really strong. It's pretty much Sword of Avarice, just like
it's a 2-for-1, except they lose 1, you draw 1.
The thing is, like, drawing 2 is probably objectively better, but like discarding 1 from them feels a lot better. Feels worse for them.
Right.
Like they're just like, I can't do anything.
Sort of Prismatic Edge is banning, right, or banishing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like, okay, all right. So I guess maybe Water Rye, you can hit.
Yeah, it's bad against Rye. Like, you don't do it against Rye. He's like,
I mean,
please.
You're happy against Rye doing it anyways, right? He has no hand size to be able to combo off. So
it's true.
Speaking of Rye.
Speaking of Rye.
Speaking of Rye, next thing is Reckless Conversion. That's on the Category 2 list. I mean, this card, I love Reckless Conversion. I think this card's awesome.
It's a, did you read their thoughts about it?
No.
It's very odd to me that I agree that like this card is potentially dangerous, but the reasoning for why this card is dangerous is much different than how I feel about it. Which is like, of course, it's their game; they're designing it, so like, they have a very different lens on it than we do. But so like, Reckless Conversion is this sort of like kill power card, and they say in the notes here that that's how it was designed. Is that it was designed to be the card that Rye plays to kill you.
Yeah. Because,
you play these like Pyramid Manas and these Careful Studies, and you draw a bunch of cards, and then this sort of like refunds your whole hand, and then you kill them.
Yep.
Right? And so that's why this card is scary. It's because it kills people.
Right.
But they were like, the reason, I think it says in there, maybe I'm pulling it out of my ass, but it was something along the lines of, it's not consistent enough at killing people, so it leads to longer games is why they're worried about it, which is crazy to me. They're like, it's not 100%, and so it leads to a lot of like decision paralysis and long turns where your opponent has to like watch you storm. It's like watching somebody play storm combo, which does suck. I get that, but
I will say I can agree with that because there are definitely times where I've cast, or well, I guess I've activated Reckless Conversion.
Sure.
And what happens is, I'm like, okay, now I have to think about this in percentages.
Right.
What's the percentage that they hit my Arcane Blast? And it's like, okay, or both of my Arcane Blasts.
Right.
Because if they do, then I can't win.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, how do I dump more cards to like lower that percentage?
Right.
What am I willing to live with?
Right.
It is. It does feel like, they're just watching me sit there with cards in my hand, like thinking for like 30, 40 seconds and being like, okay,
well, it's like,
I think I can do this.
That's fine, but if they're worried about Rye's long combo turns, why did they design Rye the way that they did? He's like very clearly like a storm deck, right? Like so, your opponent's gonna take long combo turns, but like you make up for it every other turn of the game. All of your Rye turns last like 8 seconds because you're like creative shock pass. And they're like, I'm gonna play a bunch of stuff. You're like, okay, go ahead.
Right, it's like Drago.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can agree that it's a scary card, but I'm glad to know that like they're aware of the design. They designed it to be the kill card for Rye, which like makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is virtually like a draw 7 usually. But I can see in my own personal opinion less so the like worried about long terms. Just like this sort of effect is obviously very powerful, especially as we get better arcane cards. Like what's it called, Voltic Surge or something? The sphere, Voltic Sphere. Yeah, like that card's insane, especially with Reckless Conversion, where you're like, well, if you hit these, I'm just up cards, which is crazy. So yeah, it's a little bit scary, but I think like especially right now, Rye really needs it to compete.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of scarier now, where you're not trying to race as hard against Lorraine.
Yeah,
I think getting that extra turn, you can really turn it from something that is like seemingly random into something that's pretty guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that part about Ryan, and I think I agree with Trent, and might be putting some more time into Rye in the coming future, because I do think he has a real chance now that Lorraine's a little bit tempered.
I for sure agree with that.
Yeah, and he's sweet.
Yeah,
Arcane Blast and people's cool. I played like Tess for a long time. Like I love storming.
Me too.
I love doing some nonsense and my opponent losing the game from full.
Yeah, I was like, I think it's super fun because it's like trying to find the line, and especially with Reckless Conversion, you're like, okay, if I put these down, then I know that these, like, at least 2 of these are gonna go, which puts me at level 9, like, so then I can do this. Yeah, no, it's
but I get
cool.
where they're coming from, where like so many storm decks. I keep doing this. Storm is a mechanic in Magic. They're combo decks. So many combo decks. Your like opponent is playing their creatures or whatever it is that they're doing on their turn. You're like, yeah, whatever. And you're like thinking about your like combo line, and then by the time it gets to your turn, if you're still alive, you like usually have it planned out.
Yeah.
But I can see where they're worried about Reckless Conversion, where it is you cannot plan ahead of time because it is literally random. Truly random. It's truly random. So I get that they're concerned where you have to sort of figure out your combo line after you cast this card.
I'm like. I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority where I'm kind of not worried about combo players being slow in tournaments, because I don't think if you're feeling inconsistent with the funny combo deck, surely you're not taking it to the tournament.
Right.
Yeah. It's also like, a lot of it comes from experience too. Like, it's like, I know exactly what to do in this situation. I know exactly what cards to play because I've done this 100 times.
Right.
Where, I haven't had the time to put in the reps. So I'll sit there and I'm like, can I win with this?
Right.
I have to do the math, and I'm like, okay, if I put these 2 down and this, or like, with Storm, you can just, or in Magic, with Storm, you can just look at it and be like, yeah, I got this.
Right, exactly. It's like very clear. You look at your hand, you're like, yeah, this kills you.
Super linear.
And you get to the point too where like people that play the format enough, you can just be like, you like show them your hand, you're like, yeah, you're done. They're like, yes, I am. I agree.
I kind of wish it was a deterministic Storm deck rather than a non-deterministic.
I think that's their problem with it.
Yeah.
But if it gets deterministic, then it might be too good, right? Like that's the balancing mechanic.
Yeah.
But it comes back to like, obviously the development team has a very different lens than we do. Maybe they come from a different background than we do. Maybe they're obviously like goals and aspirations for the game are different than what we want, which is totally reasonable. I think that comes back to, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, the like discussion about influence that they did in the FTC like dev notes, where they're like, we don't want people to have these like super big hands of cards and all this like dearth of decisions that leads to decision paralysis. And I'm like, that's all I want. Like I surely do want to have my 12 card hand and have to decide which of these 2 cards that I play out of these 12 are best. So it all depends what their goal
kind
is.
of an aside, but there's also like a little bit of a community sentiment where like it's pretty divided on Rye, where a lot of people like absolutely hate playing against it, and I'm like just kind of fine with it.
Yeah.
But
it's a skill check for them, right? Which is, the best that you do against Rye is you provide as fast a clock as possible, and you hope that they don't have it or that they don't play well enough. And so I can understand where,
it feels
people
a little
don't
out
love
of your
that,
hands
but like we all, I think everybody on the desk right now is a fan of combo decks. So it's, from the other side, like even in other games when I play against combo, even if I'm not playing combo, I'm like, go off, King.
It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, show me how you win. I'd like to see it.
I've played so much Amulet Titan, I can't complain.
So that's the 2 cards on their Category 2 list, and then we have a few cards on the Category 1 list, which are basically just like these cards are really powerful and currently not really an issue, but could lead to unhealthy play experiences in the future. So we can start with Creative Shock is at the top. If anybody who watches our beautiful podcast, thank you. Creative Shock was what I voted the number 1 most powerful card in Dawn of Ashes. So
wow,
I feel very similarly today than I did then.
Yeah,
I'm actually kind of interested because I've like, I guess I'm coming from the perspective of playing like Fire Mordred, Fire Xander, Fire Lorraine. I'm all into the aggro Running Flames. I always feel like it's just like one reserve too expensive for me to get what I want out of the card, but I'm not getting the class bonus, so maybe other people feel differently about it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I feel about this card is that, like, you see shades of lots of things that are problematic all on the same card, where it's fairly low costed. I think 3 is like a very reasonable cost for most things in the game. It is card draw. Which obviously card draw is very powerful. We see that with everything. It's not exactly card advantage, but it is card draw, so it's selection. You get to see more cards and have more dearth of options. It's card discard, which is great for things like floating memory. It's obviously great for now stuff like Voltic Sphere. It's being able to put a card selectively into your graveyard in a game that has already proven that sometimes graveyard synergies matter is gross. And just stapling a shock onto this card so that you just, like, it is at very worst 2 damage to their head in these like aggressive combo decks that are looking to, close out the game. Obviously, like Mark said, this is a class bonus thing, so this is only for mage. But also in your slower mage decks where you're trying to control the board and get a little bit longer, it's a removal spell.
Yep.
So I think this card just has too much... it's too modal. It has too many things going on on one
everything's
card.
just tacked on.
It's just everything that you want. Like, I think usually what I point to when I'm talking about how powerful this card is the fact that, like you said, your Fire Mordred decks, your Fire Lorraine decks, there's no way that you should be playing this card. There are so few cards in the game that have class bonus that you play outside of the class bonus because they are so powerful, and Creative Shock is one of them that, like, even without its class bonus, the card's just absurd, and every
That's
red
a
deck
fair
plays it.
argument, but my thought process is, like, most of the... I think of Rai as, like, the mage. Obviously, he's the one who's got the level 3.
Right.
I understand, like, hitting face is fine. It makes your combo easier, but I don't see the class bonus as the good part of the card, so maybe that is the problem, is that everyone just wants the filtering.
Right.
But I think as more cards come into the game and, like, it's easier to float, because float's honestly the most important part of the game, setting up float.
Yeah.
I think the card will get not phased out. It'll still be played, but it won't seem as egregious.
Yeah, I think I can see where you're coming from. I think it's also possible that it goes the other way, right? Where if we get more cards that care about, like, graveyard matters, then it swings back the other way, where having a reliable discard outlet is also better. But I agree that as you get more playable cards with float, because I mean, a lot of times Creative Shock now is like discarding your veteran soldiers because they're your tempered steels, I guess is the best example, is because it's a card you're just literally never casting that you just want it for float. So, like, when you get more playable cards with float, I guess this card does lose some value. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
super strong.
If they put Reanimate in the game, sure.
Yeah, then,
I mean,
then
like,
busted.
then it's Faithless Looting, right? And
Right.
then it's like, oh, this card's got to go.
Well, that's I was trying to escape the magic illusions, but that's definitely how I feel about it, right? It's that, like, Faithless Looting is a card in Magic the Gathering that draws 2 cards and then discards 2 cards for 1 mana. Was a fine card for 8 years. Until it wasn't. Until they're like, oh, this does not. Oh, I see. So I think Creative Shock fits in that same spot where it's like, it's pretty good now, and Faithless Looting was pretty good for a long time, but not, like, broken until it is, and then they have to get rid of it.
That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also, like, the decks you're running it in, right? Like, this goes in every Fire deck. Just straight up every Fire deck that I play right now has Creative Shock in it. I think every Fire deck that I play next
in FTC
will also have Creative Shock in it.
But Mark's right. Maybe we get to a point where that's not the case.
Yeah. I think once we get there, then we'll see. But the +2 damage off the fire, like the class bonus, that is pretty strong.
Yeah, it's just like icing on the cake. Right?
And tack onto it's a mage spell, so, like, you get to put an enlightenment counter on, which I like enlightenment counters.
Me too.
Like,
you do? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
wild.
That's wild.
I just want 30 enlightenment counters.
I think there's a lot of, like, internal bias towards it too, where I'm not like Hasty Messenger feels more impressive in the aggro decks, but it's like, I think that
she's a beater, right? Yeah.
Creative Shock's, like, probably surely just better. So I think you've convinced me that I'm just, like, wrong here.
To be fair, I do think they're pretty close. I think Hasty's also kind of a nuts card.
Yeah.
But, like, the thing about Hasty is she's, slow speed. I gotta stop doing this.
Yeah.
She's slow speed, and on a body that you can remove.
You can also
you can
creative
interact.
shocker. You
Right.
can creative shocker.
Yeah, that's true. She gets
Right? I think like the thing is, at least Tasty will still get a trigger, right? Because it's on attack.
Sure.
So you don't have any
Yeah,
opportunity.
she's not
in between.
interactive in that way until we
Yeah.
get actual counter spells. But
Stifle.
we're not thinking about this the right way, gentlemen. We have to come to the agreement that we should petition to get Creative Shock banned so that another podcast can join us in no longer being in the game. So I'm sure,
Creative Shock isn't real anymore.
I'm sure you'll hear, those boys over at Creative Shock be like, this card's not even good. Why is it even on the list? But it's because they're trying to save their namesake, That's all I'm saying.
Lineage breaks should be real.
I agree. Bring it back.
I think this next one on the list is something that caught me by surprise a lot.
Sure.
Tactful Sergeant. 4
Yeah.
mana, 4/1. If you attacked, you put a card in from the top of your deck into memory.
Right. Yeah, I'm also kind of shocked that this card is on the watch list, where this card is the like most classic in this game version of a 2-for-1. It's been the one that we've had for the longest, like even before Boogeyman Lorraine was discovered, back when we were worried about Erupting Rhapsody combo. Tactful Sergeant is a 2-for-1. But I think it's like a very fairly costed 2-for-1. It costs 4, which is a lot, especially, in these sort of creature-based decks where you're trying to really like get onto the board. 4 reserve is a lot. And it also has a condition. It's not like it's just a 4-drop, draw a card into memory. You have to have attacked this turn, and we know as the way that warriors work, like durability is a real resource. So like you have to spend a resource to draw.
You need to keep your
card.
swords on the board for your Ascension.
Right. So I do think this card is powerful. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just a little bit surprised that this is on their watch list.
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, bud. No, you're good.
All right, I was gonna say, I think it's really the shell that it's in, because in Wind Lorraine, this card is absolutely nuts. In like Wind anything else, it's okay, like because you're going for you put a card in your memory, so you're turning that next turn into a lot of extra damage.
Right.
I mean, because it's also human as well, so like the human tribal element is like very strong right now.
Yeah, that's what I wonder. Do we think Tactful Sergeant would even be in the conversation if it did not have creature type human, ally type human?
No, personally.
No. I mean, I'm just like looking to cut this card though. Like I'm
Right.
excited for something to come out that I can cut this card.
Yeah, I think I think it doesn't fit great into the aggro shells. So I think especially with FTC where we're getting some more cheaper costed humans. If you're looking to do the human tribal route, she sees sort of the backseat. And, she fits into these, like, sort of mid-rangey win decks. And maybe, as we get more cards, there is a win deck that's lower on the curve, and there's a win deck that's higher on the curve. And the higher on the curve deck is going to want to play Tactful Sergeant more than the latter. But I don't know. I do feel a little bit strange about this one.
Casting this has never felt like a slam dunk for me where
Sure.
I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I want to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Playing like Banner Knight into Phalanx Captain for 3 is where I'm like, oh my god,
Sure.
Right.
this is what I want to be doing.
Yeah, I wonder if this is the same issue as Sword of Avarice that is on their watch list, and that we sort of agree that we think Ascension is the issue, not so much Sword of Avarice, and maybe Tactful Sergeant is the same, where it's like Phalanx Captain is the problem, not Tactful Sergeant.
Yeah. Well, I think that the 4 body on this makes it so that they're going to invest at least probably 2 resources into getting rid of it later on, because I mean, it's still a 1/4, so it's still more damage. Plus, it gets the bonus from being a human.
Right.
So I think it's like hidden card advantage or hidden tempo advantage in a lot of ways. So I can see why it's on the list, but if it wasn't a human, I think it would be probably not on the list.
Right. I think about Dream Fairy a lot.
Yeah.
Which is just such an absurdly powerful effect, but so few people run it because it's not a human.
Yeah. I love Dream Fairy. I think the card is great,
but that's the issue with it, surely.
Yeah.
You would be running 3-4 of those in your deck if she was a human,
Yeah, absolutely.
running 4 Windrider Vanguards, which is just
Yeah.
the best human in your deck, and it's just a 2/3 that untaps,
Right.
I think
so,
you'd
yeah.
also play it if it had like a better body, because I think
Sure.
the body is like
1/2 stealth though. It's like
stealth-
actually pretty good.
The stealth is relevant. Stealth is really
stealth's
relevant.
not in Lorraine.
Well, not in
Lorraine
Lorraine,
hell,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But no, I mean that's fair. But I like even if it was like an 03 or an 04 or something,
Sure.
I'd be way happier.
Yeah.
04 would be kind of nuts.
04 would
would
be
be
broken.
nuts,
It'd be
yeah.
kinda
Absolutely
crazy.
overpowered. But
All right. So moving on, we have Varrock Smoldering Spire.
I'm also sort of on the fence about this one. I don't know how you guys feel. I can understand their thoughts about it. but-
I am all in with them on this one.
Oh yeah.
Really?
I think this card's absurd. I'm kind of interested in why you guys don't think so. I think specifically in looking at Fracture the Crown, I think this makes sense.
Yeah.
DOA on its own, I don't think this card's a problem, but the fact that they're making that creature that ETP destroys Nullifying Lantern.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can just like Nullifying Lantern, no problem. Say you're playing like you're playing Alan or something, you're playing Erupting Rhapsody.
Right.
I think Erupting Rhapsody works with this card.
It does.
correct?
Yeah. It's
so,
fire sources. Yeah.
Yeah. So just being able to like play that, have a Varric without worrying about having to materialize for that one turn, and then just Erupting Rhapsody and there's nothing they can do about it. I think that card is like kind of egregious.
Yeah, I read the notes that they have in this card, and I think that's the only, like, I can agree with their decision to put it on the watch list. I think right now, and maybe you're right, Fractured Crown is where the problem lies. I think right now this card is like a very necessary evil, where the decks that want to deal you, these fire decks that want to deal you damage, get so blown out by prevention effects like Deflecting Edge and Veiling Breeze, that the existence of this card, it's like the cat and mouse game, right?
Mm.
Where and the same thing with Nullifying Lantern and like Spurned Ash and Varrock and Acolyte, like you were saying, where you bring a strategy to the table, your opponent brings a thing to counter your strategy, you bring a thing to counter your opponent's counter to your strategy. I think is great and healthy. But I can see where I think what they said in their notes is that as the game ages, and I know this might also be a crackpot theory, but we spend a lot of time on the Discord. We hear things. This article came out after the dev team was on a playtesting cruise. I don't know if you guys heard about the cruise. So I think it's very possible that some of these cards are with set 3 in mind, that they're on the watch list, because obviously all of the things like the rules change. And if there were any BNR, like actual bans, are reflective of right now, but I think the watch list can very much be reflective of things that they're planning in the future, and they're just trying to let people know, which is great, that they're not leaving us in the dark on this information. But yeah, they said as the game ages, interaction is seemingly becoming more prevention-based, and so when all of the interaction becomes prevention-based, the more cards this turns off, and the more cards this turns off, the more of a staple it becomes, and the more often these red decks are just like, the aggressive red decks like turn 3 are just like every game, I play a Varrock, it's not a sideboard card anymore, I just play 4 in my main deck because every piece of interaction is damage prevention. So I can see where that becomes a problem.
I think the reason it doesn't feel so bad right now is like coming off of Win Lorraine, where I'm playing 3 Spirits Blessing. Last week there was a game where I Spirits Blessinged my Nullifying Lantern back in twice.
Right.
And just like they couldn't participate in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like right now it feels very favored in the player playing Nullifying Lantern and playing Wind. But I think when that 3-1 that comes out that destroys Nullifying Lantern, I think it's going to skew more towards fire.
Sure.
So set 3 might be the reason, but I think set 2...
It could be both, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, I don't think that set 2 comes out and they're going to ban Varrock, But
Yeah,
it
I
probably
don't
just
think
like
so either.
moves up on their list, It's like, well, it's becoming more of a problem, and then, maybe we get to a point where it's too much.
Yeah, I mean, it turns off you materializing a card, but you just do it on the turn you want to do stuff.
Yeah, it's one of the domains that, like, and I think they're actually all like this, the ones from DOA. Where it's just like not really a downside. It's just like you just do it when you don't care anymore.
Yeah, when it's like, oh, that's cool. I'll just like either go around it because I don't think that Spirit Blade Ascension counts as materializing a card.
Does
so
not.
you just get
Neither
to,
does Dungeon Guide.
Yeah, slide it in and out. That's fine. Yeah, Yeah, so it really has like a very limited downside at the moment because of that and because of that wording. So I don't know, we'll see. But you're right about the prevention thing. I think that a lot of the damage mitigation does come from prevention effects.
Yeah, we gotta make our girl Blanche playable, right?
Yeah, right.
That's all that matters.
For sure.
Keep our girl on the table. Actually, she's a terrible card. Blanche Shelton says it's a terrible card. If you have CSRs that you're looking to sell, you guys know where to find me. Anyway,
At least $5 each.
At least.
At least.
Yeah.
At least.
For you, $10, easy.
Last on the list is Freezing Hail, and that's pertinent because of the rules change that was recently made regarding waking up champions. So, I mean, I think Freezing Hail belongs on the list here because I think that it's, again, forward-looking. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting choice, but I think the card's great. I actually really like Freezing Hail a lot, and especially with the rules change, I think it'll be nice because I'm a water player at heart.
Yeah, I think it's great. Sorry, I can't say anything's great anymore. I'll get bullied. The thing that I really like about this article is how like open and honest they are with their feelings about the game, where Freezing Hail has seen virtually no play. And I've never seen another game where they put a card on a list like this, where like, we're just looking at this before anyone has played it.
Yeah.
They're just like, internal playtesting has said that post this rules change, Freezing Hail is kind of nuts. And so we're going to keep an eye on Freezing Hail because we think it's kind of crazy. And I'm like, thank you for that insight. You know, it's like, because they don't have to do anything with this information. Like, I don't care if the category 1 list is, 300 cards long. It's like, this is the stuff we're thinking about right now, where like, yeah, Freezing Hail has seen literally no play. And we've played it a couple of times this week, or at least, I haven't, and it feels much better than it used to.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
Well, I like the transparency, saying that like, hey, we play tested this with the rules change, and like this card is kind of nuts.
Right.
So we will look at it. We'll make sure that it doesn't get too out of hand. But if it does, we'll ban it.
Sure.
Like, so I think it's nice to know that at least they are thinking about that ahead of time, because it shows that they are actively working on it and playing with all the cards too. So
right.
I think it's nice.
It's a little interesting because it feels like an anti-Lorraine card that just didn't work. Like it's just inconsistently anti-Lorraine.
It works now though.
But oh boy, now does it feel real bad.
Yeah, it's a good card. If you chain these like turn 3 through 4, it just like feels insane.
I think you like.
I chained a couple. I think
you hit me with a couple of them when I was trying to kill you with Ensoul.
Right.
And I just couldn't untap my Crux Knight Lorraine.
And that's like -6 damage or something.
Yeah.
On
Deal 2, heal
turn.
6. Pretty good.
It's pretty good. So yeah, I think that's super cool. I mean, I think any game that is like, that bans too many cards, awful for the game. Truly awful. But something like this, where they just like give us a heads up of things that they're thinking about and like things that potentially could be unhealthy, I think is a much better way to go about bans, where like at least nobody's going to get blindsided, when they're like, yeah, we banned Sword of Avarice. Like, you didn't even, how were we supposed to know?
I just picked up 8 foils.
Yeah. But also, like, I do like the implication that they just, like, never really have to do anything with this list if they decide not to. So, like, the information to the player base is just wholly free for them to share, and there's no reason that they have to, but it's like, really, I think, cool that they did.
Yeah, I
share
agree.
their thoughts with us.
It's kind of interesting because it gives us, like, an insight that kind of gives us a key into maybe some strategies that are, like, really good. But at the same time, you can't, as a developer, like, have the same level of testing that a whole player.
Surely.
Obviously,
Yeah.
The player base is going to find stuff
Right.
that you're never going to find. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether these actually pan out.
And yeah, and then there's vice versa too, where like, for all we know, like Infusion Lorraine, like Steve and I had been playing this game since pre-Kickstarter, and nobody was playing it, but it was there the whole time. It's not like anything changed in the game to make that better. It just took 3 months for us to find out. And so, it for all we know, like these cards could have some awful implications the day FTC comes out, and we're just oblivious. We have no idea. We're just
totally blindsided.
Man, that was so weird. And then 2 months later, somebody figures out the deck that's like Freezing Hail OTKs you on turn 1 or something. It's like, I don't know, So
It's kind of interesting that it. Sorry, this is another aside. But it's kind of interesting that it took so long for people to find out. I think it had
It's a
it
small
must have
community,
been
right?
must have been something about because I wasn't in it until release.
Right.
Yeah.
So it must have been something about the drawn blade interaction, like drawn blade dungeon guide that wasn't really thought about or something.
There was a few like little micro changes too, where like when something's good, people are more often to follow the thing that is good than to come up with something new, right? So like when the game first came out, we were so
Water
worried
and
about
Soul, right?
Yeah, the I think the first deck that was like really problematic was like Erupting Rye, but obviously that one did have a change made when we got Nullifying Lantern pushed forward to Altar. Is without that, Erupting would be much scarier than it is now. And then In Soul was a little bit better when like before the Spirit Blade Dispersion change. So there were some things that meant that people weren't looking really for replacements for those sorts of cards, but I think even without Nullifying Lantern and with the Dispersion change, Infusion's still insane. So like people could have found it earlier,
Right.
they just didn't, But it's a small community, so.
Yeah, and I mean meta changes all the time too, right?
Right.
Like so it's what's being played at your store. Then it's like,
Right.
oh, I'm looking at the cards to solve that kind of thing. So I think that's where a lot of innovation comes in too.
Yeah, the meta's so much wider now that everybody's playing at a local level that you
Yeah.
know, some people are like, oh, this is insane, or oh, this is terrible, because they're like, all I play against is Rise, or
Right, like
my entire meta is Anders.
I was gonna say I keep talking about how like I think the needle is like more pointed towards aggro, but like
It's just
maybe
'cause-
someone's out there with like 8 Water Xander decks in their meta, and it's
Right.
like, no, this game's all control. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, I
so,
agree.
Who knows?
I would like to introduce them to aggro. That sounds like a great bracket for me. I'll play Mordred.
So I think that's all that we have today. I think we've gone a little bit long, so we
Yeah.
should probably cut it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the show. We are without our glorious Steve today as he got called into work, but Steve will be back next week. Don't worry, all you Steven stans.
Steve Enjoyers.
Steve enjoyers. Steve will be back enjoying his seat next week. But of course, thank you boys for being on the show. Thank you guys for watching. We will be talking more about some spoiler stuff, I think, next week, as we had a bunch that came out this week, but we've already gone long talking about BNR. We don't have time to do that. We will also be recording some more gameplay and stuff, because we put one of those out. If you guys haven't watched it, you can go check it out now. And people seem to really like it, so we're gonna
Get
do
to
some more of
watch
that.
me very egregiously.
Just cheat a little bit. Just a little cheat.
Hey.
You both cheated, if that makes you feel better.
I did mess up on the class bonus, but aside from that, you get to watch me just absolutely sack with how many cards I drew.
Yeah, that's also
It was
true.
pretty egregious.
That was pre-rules change, everybody. So.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you next week.